Hello and welcome to Weaving Willow Coffins, tending a living tradition and supporting localized death care. We'd like to start by introducing ourselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mo Walrath. I am a willow coffin maker, basket maker, interdisciplinary artist, and mother. Talking to you from Port Townsend, Washington, Squalum lands. And I learned to weave willow baskets about 10 years ago now from my teacher, Margaret Mathewson, in the Coast Range in Oregon. And then I went on to apprentice with an Irish basket maker in the north part of Ireland in Donegal with a weaver named Brendan Farron.
Hi, I'm Mary Lauren Fraser, and I am in Western Massachusetts, Southern Abenaki territory, and I am a basket maker and a coffin weaver and a musician and teacher and community organizer. I learned basket weaving in Scotland in 2014 when I was 20, and I lived with my basket teacher, Karen Collins, and worked with her for a few months, and then started my business and started teaching when I got home that same year. And yeah.
And I'm Sarah Laswell. I'm a farmer, a mother, and a casket weaver in Western North Carolina on Cherokee lands. I began growing willow in 2018, and in 2020, I learned to weave willow caskets from Mary Lauren Fraser, carrying on the tradition of basketry that she learned from her teacher in Scotland. We will be presenting our talk in 3 sections. First, Mo will share some information on willow basketry and the tradition of willow casket weaving through history. Then Mary will talk about current willow casket weavers, cottage industry, and sustainability here in North America. And lastly, I'll talk about the experience of working with a local community casket weaver and the benefits of local death care economies. Thank you so much for joining us today, and over to Mo.
All right, I'm starting us off with some of the history around willow baskets and willow coffins. And here is an image of some pretty epic willow coppices up to the right and beautiful golden willow on the ground there. As human beings, we're all descendants of cultures deeply embedded in crafted objects made with wise and knowing hands. The craft of weaving baskets is an ancient technology of the hands that has been practiced by human cultures across time and space. Analysis of carved stone figures, some found in Europe, Russia, and Siberia, dating from between 20,000 and 30,000 BC, show that people from the early Stone Age or Paleolithic era had already mastered the art of weaving plant fibers into cloth, nets, and baskets. And here you can see the textures of different nets and woven structures that are embedded in clay. Craft and the traditions within craft are continually evolving, keeping us tethered to our roots while also reflecting contemporary society. The traditions surrounding how our beloved dead have been held, carried, celebrated, and returned to the earth is as varied and diverse as human cultures themselves. And here's a beautiful infant coffin woven up by Mary. The vessels or lack of vessels to hold our dead are rooted in the traditional lifeways of the cultures they are made within, a reflection and expression of the culture and ecology. In this way, we imagine the willow coffins and carriers we make rooted in tradition and also forever changing shape as the cultures around us change shape. Embedded within our baskets are the traditions and techniques of willow basketry across Europe. Venerating the basket weaving traditions of our ancestors opens up perspectives to venerate the indigenous basket weaving traditions and cultures throughout the world. The weaving tradition we're presenting on here is rooted in the European wicker tradition of working with first-year whole shoot willow. Fragments of possible wicker or stake and strand baskets dating from about 900 BC were found in Ireland, but it is safe to conclude that wicker baskets were in use long before that. These traditions have migrated along with their people, and some are left on other shores. The weaving of coffins is just one approach to keeping the tradition of basket making alive in these times. Along with the weaving of baskets comes the practice of being in a reciprocal relationship with the land, the larger rhythms and cycles of the earth, and human and non-human community. The practice of coppicing, to cut back to ground level to stimulate growth, is an ancient practice of tending plants. You cut the plant periodically to allow the plant to regenerate new growth, and then it is used for baskets and other coppice crafts. This practice can look like tended patches, fields, gardens, or diverse coppiced woodland with hazel, ash, oak, and other ones that sprout new growth after being cut. Willow is abundant, and each year after an initial planting and ongoing coppicing sends up more and more shoots, strengthening at the root. Here's an image of willow in summertime, long and straight with the leaves on, dwindling, the leaves slightly getting a little bit more crunchy with fall, and finally dropping. And so this is what the willow looks like when it's ready to be harvested. The willow is cut and sorted by size, bundled, and then cured to be soaked again for weaving at a later time. So here's some bundles of willow that haven't been sorted yet, but are just bundled from the harvest. And you can see the willow patch in the background there. Again, some unsorted bundles, and all the different colors come from different species of willow. So that color is just a part of the willow. And here's some bundles that are sorted by size. So you can see the very small, which are used for smaller baskets, and then grading up to the taller willow, and they get much taller than this. And for the coffins, we use anywhere from, well, I use anywhere from 6 to 10 foot willow. And then here's an image of a soak tank. So it's like a feed trough that I use as a soak tank or water trough. It's 8 feet long, and willow waiting to be soaked on the right. And then here's willow being soaked in a creek. This whole process has its own timing, and we like to say that willow keeps the time. This is also a practice of scale and working within a healthy scale to the body. Willow coffins or caskets have a many-limbed history within the context of burial and ceremony, as well as for their utility. Willow coffins have been used as transfer baskets, like we're seeing here, or as vessels to store bodies before being moved for burial. They were also common during the grief-filled reality of the Civil War, as they were moved with ease and cheaper to produce than wooden coffins. It is only within the last few decades that willow coffins have been made, bought, and sold outside of a bioregional context. Prior to the abandonment or loss of traditional burial practices and the associated rituals and craft, burial vessels, if any were made, were a reflection of the culture and ecology they were made within. I asked Irish basket maker Joe Hogan if he has come across any information about willow coffins in his extensive research and recording of the heritage craft of basketry in Ireland. And he said, while the coffins in the form they are in now don't necessarily go back through the ages, there have been remains of certain styles of woven burial vessels in the north part of Ireland. And here I just included some images from Joe Hogan's book, Basket Making in Ireland. This is an image of some donkey panniers or creels, as they're called. And again, I showed these because they're also made with pretty large willow, and they're very, very, very strong. And this is another image of a weaver weaving up what are called skips. And these were used to actually transport yeast, quickly woven. And you can see in the background there a whole pile of them. And these were used before cardboard boxes came onto the scene. So again, just showing the utility and the use of baskets and how it changes over time along with the culture. Hogan also says that the difficulty about stake and strand baskets from an archaeological perspective is that the materials they are made from, whether willow or hazel, are relatively short-lived, even when buried underground. Thus, a wicker basket that could be strong enough to support the weight of a person or allowed to fall from a height without being damaged may well disappear without a trace a few hundred years later. What a perfect and amazing decomposing craft to carry us into the holy dark of the earth. Curious how this craft of willow coffin weaving can reflect the local ecology and cultures they are made within, affordable and sustainable to the communities they are serving and holding. How might all of the diverse approaches to basket making lead to a vibrant local economy, ecology, and human culture to take stronger root? Here's an amazing picture of Mary in her workshop making a coffin. And to me, I don't doubt that my ancestors and the ancestors of others wove baskets as an integral craft of everyday life. I also know that human beings have wrapped, held, and carried our beloved dead in beauty and reverence in the ways our hands and bodies knew and had available to us. And what I like to say is, may these vessels be offerings for the ones they hold, the lands that receive them, and for the possibility of healing through human hands and culture. And now I'm gonna pass it over to Mary. Thanks.
Thanks, Mo. I'm Mary, and I'm going to be talking about what the tradition of coffin weaving looks like today around the world. Today, there is a very active coffin weaving tradition and industry on a global scale. In places such as Bangladesh, China, Poland, and others, there is large-scale production. Most of these businesses export their goods at bulk prices. In the UK, Ireland, and other parts of Western Europe, there is a thriving scene of cottage industry, localized business, direct sales that pay the makers a living wage, and a strong community-based tradition. Here in North America, the tradition of coffin weaving is just being revived in the last 10 years. We have me, Mary Fraser, and I started my business in New England in 2015. Maureen Walrath in the Pacific Northwest since 2017. Sarah Laswell in Appalachia since 2020. India West in the Midwest since 2021, Bonnie Gale in New York State since 2020, Moonbeam Gardebring of the Southwest since 2020, and Deborah Dewberry of Ontario, Canada since 2020. As of this presentation, these I just listed are the only makers on the continent offering a locally made supply of willow coffins. All the other biodegradable woven coffins available in North America are imported. This is an important place I want to pause and talk about. We know from an environmental point of view that there's a heavier carbon footprint on imported goods, and that most conservation cemeteries and even some hybrid cemeteries require that any burial products be locally made because of that environmental impact. Also, with imports, there's the risk that someone, usually the maker of the product, is not getting paid a living wage or is otherwise being exploited. And beyond the environmental and humanities point of view, there's the importer and the consumer, who are both relying on a product that has to go through an extensive change of hands to be received and can easily meet an interruption when such events as a global pandemic, war, or economic depression halt that supply chain and make the product unavailable. There is added to this as well the matter of material sourcing and the fact that the willow used in imported coffins is grown elsewhere from where it's being woven, and then of course from where it's getting buried. Once all these factors are added together, especially the matter of the large carbon footprint on imported coffins, it is fairly clear that imports are not, quote, green, unquote, and that focusing on local supply is very essential to the entire definition of green burial. Although imports are the primary supply we have in the country at the moment, this is fortunately changing and quickly. In this rapidly growing local tradition of coffin weaving, there's an astounding level of interest from people wanting to learn the craft and offer it within their communities, and as well from consumers. Myself and Mo Walrath are now teaching people how to weave coffins, and so the skill is spreading to more hands and will be more and more locally available within North America. We can see in the next 5 to 10 years the supply of imported green products shifting to a local supply chain more and more. There are numerous gains to be made from this shift beyond those already mentioned. Aside from the obvious reason of environmental sustainability and providing the public with a true to ethos product, there is a huge impact on communities in the form of personal connection with the maker. All the coffin weavers I've spoken with report endless appreciation from their customers that the vessel they laid their loved one to rest in was made by someone they could meet and talk to and get to know personally. We will hear more about this in Sarah's part of the presentation. And another gain to be had is the relationship with willow farming and production. The majority of the willow sourced in the US is grown on small family farms, fueled by human hands and grown organically. This is also a growing supply, and in a few years' time, there will be plenty of willow for larger production of willow coffins by our community of makers. There's also the link of the handcraft and skill of coffin weaving being passed from maker to maker. This, as Mo shared earlier, is a centuries-old tradition already, and carrying it forward on the same small human scale as when it began carries within it the same beauty and humbling importance that death and dying also carry. That though we may try to mechanize and control it, at the end of the day, it is and can only ever be a human experience. Weaving coffins belongs in our hands and our communities, and it offers us a living relationship. In conclusion, coffin weaving as a community-supported craft gives so much connection and relationship between the maker and the customers, between the maker and the willow, and between where the willow is grown to where the coffin made from it is buried, which is often within the same bioregion. It begins to be a full circle practice, is transparent in its process, and is filling out the meaning of a living tradition. This is a living tradition. Thank you. Now I will pass it over to Sarah.
Hello, I'm Sarah Laswell, and in this final third of our presentation, I'm going to look more closely at the experience of working with the local casket weaver, as well as what local death care economies can look like and what they can bring to communities and to individuals. Much like green burial in general, working with the local casket maker is not a new idea, but instead an old norm that's being revived. At the very least, it's an opportunity to support a local small business and craftsperson, but it also offers opportunities for people to be more closely involved with planning their own burial or the burial of a loved one. Sometimes a client's interaction with a casket maker may just be speaking over the phone and learning a bit more about the person who put their time and skill into that vessel. But many local makers also offer opportunities for clients to be directly involved in the creation of their own or their loved one's casket, whether through design and adding personal touches or actual hands-on experience. The process of weaving lends itself well to involving clients and family members, and many community-based casket weavers invite clients to participate in weaving caskets and urns. The craft is slow and meditative in nature, providing space for contemplation and the intimacy of touching each rod as it bends into a vessel. Friends and family can work together, stories are shared, laughter, tears. Inevitably, comments are made about how special the experience is, how much it means to be involved, how helping create the vessel helps bridge them to the upcoming burial, how much they love the basket and feel connected to it, and how this might help them at the burial. Some appreciate the opportunity to have something tangible and practical to do during days that otherwise feel overwhelming and abstract. For those participating in weaving their own caskets or burial trays, it can be an opportunity to embrace their own inevitable death, feel a sense of agency in it, or create a connection to the vessel that will one day carry their body back into the earth. These photos that I've been sharing here are from a week spent weaving a burial tray with Ursula and her future death doulas. We had friends in every decade of life, from a grandmother of 85 to a toddler and even a baby in the womb. For Ursula, the process helped shape her wishes for her own death and burial, and it also created a space to process the deaths of loved ones in the past. Now, Mary and Mo are going to share some of their weaving stories.
Last year, I had the honor of weaving a willow coffin alongside my now dear friend, Margaret. And here you can see her starting up the base. And Margaret is someone who actually approached me. She, there we go, learned about my work and the coffin weaving and was really drawn to be a part of the process. And something that became apparent while we were working together is just how deep this work goes. It's kind of an ineffable thing in that, you know, there's really not words to describe some of the feelings or some of the things that come up during the process of weaving your own coffin and then weaving someone's coffin alongside with them. But it touches a really deep place and can be very healing and inspiring, and just generally feels like a celebratory practice, which I really love. And like I said, I just am honored to be a part of that and look forward to having this relationship more and more with people over time.
So I have a story to share that is very, very dear to me. Um, it's not about a collaborative coffin weaving, but it is about working closely with the family. Um, in early 2020, I got an email from a mother who, for this story, I'll just call her Sharon, um, in upstate New York, asking if I would make a coffin for her 9-year-old daughter who had received a terminal diagnosis several years earlier. And a couple months later, I drove the casket out to their house at the top of a hill in upstate New York. And I had tea just with the mother, and she shared a lot with me about how what her daughter's attitude around death was, and just how at peace with it she was, and how much joy she had in her life, and how much love that she really was fully embracing life and fully embracing death. And I was, in tears, of course, by the time I left, and she was in tears, but like with awe, just that this young girl was so understanding of her experience. She was like leading the whole family through this experience with this like just incredible wisdom. And I never met her, but I could just feel her presence and her personality through how her mother talked about her. And about a year later, I got an email from Sharon saying that her daughter had passed about 6 months earlier, and that they had talked about what she wanted for the scattering of her ashes. And what her daughter had asked for was to have all their friends over and have a big potluck feast in May and put her ashes in a little basket at the bottom of a maypole and have all her friends dance around her and dance a maypole with a fiddler. And here's a picture just off the internet, unrelated to this experience of a maypole, just so those of you who haven't seen one can get a visual. Um, so of course I said yes, being a fiddler, and I was so honored to have made her coffin and then get this chance to be a part of her passage through music as well. And um so I went out there in early May and I played music while all her friends danced around the maypole. And then I kept playing fiddle and her mom danced through the field with her ashes, scattering her ashes. And then all together we ate this big feast. And it was one of the most beautiful days I've ever experienced. And just a little note on what a maypole is. It's an old tradition from England of tying brightly colored ribbons to the top of a wooden pole, and each dancer holds the other end of the ribbon and does an elaborate dance that weaves the ribbons around the pole in a specific pattern. And um, that this always happens on the first day of May, which is traditionally the first day of spring. So that's my story, and it just filled me with there was so much awe and there's so much indescribable feelings that happened through this experience, like Mo was saying, and also just immense um thanks. Like I just felt so grateful and so honored and so lucky to be involved in this way. Um so that's my story. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary and Mo. This is Jack and Nancy, who took a week together to weave a casket for him and an urn for her, and a casket for their aging dog, Pal. They had conversations about their end-of-life plans and burial wishes, and helped weave each other's vessels. We had moments of laughter and of tears. We talked about how their vessels would be imbued with all the love and the joy of that week we spent together. We named little weaving mistakes after their perpetrator and laughed about how in the future we would see them and remember. Jack helped design a casket for his dog Pal that was a replica of his, and at one point Pal laid down for a nap on Jack's feet as he was weaving. Jack will be buried wrapped in his grandmother's quilt. He called in friends to consult on exactly the right shade of blue-green for his casket lining to match it. The willow in Nancy's urn had orange, yellow, purple hues like a sunset. When it came time to bring the finished caskets and urn home, they invited friends and neighbors over to witness and celebrate what they had created. Just 2 weeks after my experience with Nancy, Jack, and Pal, I had the chance to in some ways be on the other side of the experience that I offer clients. I lost my dear friend Isabella and joined with her family and friends to bury her in a willow casket that I had woven. I had harbored little thoughts here and there in the past, questioning whether all of this actually mattered, whether it wasn't just romanticizing, which something that was still just raw grief. But it did matter. It mattered to me to see her in a vessel that was beautiful and warm, and that she herself had had a chance to see. It mattered to her family that her casket was made by someone that they knew, with willow grown in the mountains that they call home. And it's created ripples throughout our small community, opportunities to talk about death and dying and grief, to talk about our collective loss and what we think about the ways that we approach burials. It's given us connection. But unfortunately, as Mary talked about, there aren't community casket weavers in every city yet. In fact, right now, there's only a small handful of us in a few states, but our movement is growing. We're approached regularly by those that would like to learn to weave caskets, and we have plans for trainings and courses. Moonbeam Garderbring of Weave and Wimble is working on a mobile casket weaving studio in a schoolie that can travel to different communities. We support local willow farms and are trying to expand North American grown willow farming so that it can support more weavers. And we're spreading the word about other local makers of burial products to strengthen awareness of funeral artisans in general. This spring, several of us worked with green burial legend Lee Webster to form the Funerary Artisans Collective, a group of artists and craftspeople dedicated to making eco-friendly vessels for use in natural burial spaces. We have a website with free listings for makers in the United States and Canada that are offering handmade, sustainably sourced burial vessels, burial quilts, shrouds, and urns. www.funeraryartisanscollective.org. It's searchable by location and by type of vessel. Your region might not have its own casket weaver yet, but there might be a wooden casket maker or someone sewing burial quilts or crafting handmade urns, and many artisans do ship regionally. Even without advertising or social media, the site's gotten over 5,000 hits, and we've had a 20% increase in traffic in the last month. Lee has volunteers helping find more local makers to expand our listings. And if you know of local makers that might be interested, please help us spread the word. Green burial lends itself well to the development of local economies. Conservation and community cemeteries, family-run funeral homes, death doulas, celebrants, florists, and casket makers can all be part of local death care economies. And this does much more than just create local jobs and keep money in our local communities. It creates a death care environment that is personal and connected. It can mean coming into contact with friends and neighbors during times of grief, building networks of support, and opportunities to connect with elements of life and love that can otherwise feel far away. In a culture that separated itself from most of the practical aspects of death, locally based human-centered death care offers opportunities to find healing through participating more fully in the process of laying our loved ones to rest. We can help to wash and dress our people, dig the grave, pick the flowers that will fill the altar, meet the person that's created the burial vessel that will return their body to earth, or create that vessel ourselves. As a casket weaver serving my region in North Carolina, the relationships I have with other local death care providers have been fundamental to my business. My primary partners in this so far have been the green burial cemeteries in my area that provide information about local casket and shroud makers to families who are seeking biodegradable vessels for burial there. I also work directly with funeral homes, some of whom offer my caskets for sale, and others who receive the caskets that I deliver on behalf of a family that we're both serving. Our Death Doula network in North Carolina educates people about green burial options through social media and lists local casket makers on its website. This network is also something that the clients appreciate. They comment on how nice it is that we work together, and it gives them a sense that they're being held in a net, interconnected. As business owners, we can choose to collaborate rather than to compete, and to create regional death care networks that are strong and supportive of each other and of the communities that we serve. Competition has become the default, but it's a choice, and we can choose differently. Within green burial especially, where we're already making choices outside of the norm, we can expand the goal of sustainability to include our local economies. We can choose to sustain each other. And we can start by spreading these stories so that people know that these opportunities can exist, so that we know about alternatives that can help us come together and ways that we can help each other lay our dead to rest and to heal. Thank you all for taking the time to hear our stories and to learn about our work. We look forward to hearing your comments and your questions.